Okay. I've been working with the emergency medicine community for the last, almost since 2005, since you guys came to NIH asking for support for developing both individuals as well as research training. And it's an important road that you've been on. Part of what I get when I talk with emergency medicine folks is that they're almost a little bit apologetic about their history, and I keep going, there's nothing to be apologetic about. You spent the first 20 years changing the course of medicine by getting a new organizational chart or new organizational box on a chart. Nobody else has ever done that. So it's really quite amazing that you've created this new specialty. And that new specialty is now really poised to go in and do wonderful things. So I can say I stepped into the Duke ER in the summer as a student nurse in 1972, so ancient history. In 1978, the NIH created institutional research training programs, the T32 programs, which provide stipend and training and tuition and travel expenses. Currently, there are more than 2,200 programs that are both pre and postdoc, and they are across the United States. In 1978, the cardiology was a very well established specialty, and they started applying for these T32 programs. Okay, so what am I now? I'm now the Director of Research in the Cardiovascular Division. I've got grants that are 46 years old in my portfolio that are cardiology. Okay, so you guys didn't even exist then. And yet I've got grants that are 46 years old because cardiology was a bit ahead of you guys. So I'm trying to set the stage for where you are and what we're doing. Anyway, so as I said earlier, EM was focused on the work created to create a new specialty. And that's where you spent most of your time in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Is that it?
Right there.
What do you want me to do? Oh. You think I'd be better with a machine at this point. Anyway, what I also wanted to give you is a bit of history about emergency medicine research. In the late 80s, there were clinical emergency care research programs were forming around the country. DHS, PHS, AHRQ specifically funded pre-hospital emergency care clinical trials and studies to improve survival with defibrillator use in pre-hospital settings. I can say that because I was the program officer. The day I walked in, somebody said, oh, somebody with an ER background, and there was somebody leaving who was a guy named Bill Lohr, who had had all the emergency ICU pre-hospital studies, and they came to me. So I was the beneficiary of a wonderful stroke of luck. So we had pre-hospital studies. I got to go out and see Seattle, King County, and their facilities. I got to see Art Kellerman's facilities when he was in Memphis. I'm sure you know Mickey Eisenberg and Richard Cummins from their Sentinel work at the beginning of, in the late 80s, early 90s. I want to also say that in terms of history, in 1996, the FDA adopted the Informed Consent Rules, EFIC, as you all know them. There are a lot of things that went on at that point in time. What happened with emergency care research is it closed down every program that we had. None of our studies were permitted to continue because they didn't have EFIC. And if you ask me, it has created a great deal of problems for the field. The EFIC rules were put on by FDA, and it was sort of stepping over their boundaries because all the studies that were being conducted with devices that were already approved by FDA. But it's another story. Anyway, I want to say that this was a setback for emergency care research. I'm not sure we've figured our way out of it, though these many years later. So, with that said, now you can tell me, you want me to, I don't know what you want me to do here. Is there a click?
So it's set up as a PDF, so you just have to click the down arrow.
Okay, click the down arrow. Okay, sorry for the choppiness. Anyway, understanding NIH research training. The goal is to create competitive NIH investigators. The usual amount of time is 6 to 8 years a person, and that most people go through multiple different awards, T32, Ks, F awards. So there are multiple dimensions.
I'm going to check if there's a presenter view. I apologize. Let's see.
You know what? PDF. I did send the Adobe.
I don't see what you see on that screen. I don't see that up here. Oh, here we go.
I did send the Adobe file.
Full screen one.
Yeah, it's Adobe Reader.
Here we go. Here we go. Right here.
Okay. Okay, great.
Sorry to interrupt, just trying to help out.
For emergency medicine, we adapt. We figure things out.
Yeah, you should just be able to hit the forward button.
Forward, okay.
Yeah, you rely on people much harder than me.
Yay. Sorry, guys. So, in 2005, to pick up the history, so we started in the 70s, and you guys weren't around, 80s and 90s, you became a specialty, you created a force of your own. EFIC pulled everybody down in their way of doing research, but here we are in 2005, and SAEM and ASAP open discussions with NIH. Informing NIH, importantly, of the low number of NIH-funded investigators in emergency care research and the paucity of EM research training programs. So the 2005 meeting meant that there were a number of us who were on at that meeting and then represented NHLBI, took the information back. Everybody knows George Sopko in this room. And George Sopko and I made an argument for research training for emergency medicine. And NHLBI decided to commit money. It was upwards of $20 million for the first program. It was another $10 million for the second program. And we funded 6 specific areas, or 6 centers around the country. The research interest, and this is something of an obstacle with emergency medicine. Sometimes they want to say, I see everything, I do everything, I can research anything. But these dollars were tied to the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. So we had to fill in, so the research had to be tied to heart, lung, blood, etc. So I rewrote it and said critically ill or injured patients presenting to the ED with acute heart, lung, or blood diseases problems. We included trauma, and that was the baseline. We emphasized clinical research rather than bench research because there was so little funding for both research and research training. And the overall program was, from day one, the goal was to create scholars that would compete and get individual K grants and then move on to the R01 grants. Nothing less than that. And I was awful about reminding everybody about that every single meeting we had. So we started with EM, and then as the program was getting up and running, there was interest from a lot of other people to join the program. So we reconsidered the entry criteria and decided that perhaps rather than being emergency medicine, we should consider people who have a vested interest in research that starts in an emergency department or in a pre-hospital setting. And so this actually widened the pool of eligible applicants to be included in each of the programs. The recruits that we got were fabulous. There was great demand for the spots in this program. But we said the research starts in ED or pre-hospital setting. It widened. So we ended up with critical care, cardiology, pulmonary, trauma surgery, pediatric emergency medicine, and a host of other people in the course, in the overall program. The majority were emergency medicine and pediatric emergency medicine, but these other people added to really wonderful conversations and talking points. These are the Trailblazer programs. Vanderbilt, these are the first 6. And there were a couple of things I kept, nobody in emergency medicine at the time knew how to run an NIH institutional training program. So I strong-armed most of the programs and said, you need a partner. You know, you be the PI, the investigator, the emergency medicine scientific leader, but we need somebody who knows NIH cold, who runs these programs and knows how fast they go and how critically they're reviewed for renewal. So anyway, we ended up with Alan Storrow and Doug Weaver at Vanderbilt originally, and Doug was the head of a T32 program in cardiology at Vanderbilt. Dr. Richardson, we love Dr. Richardson. She is her own force. She came in as herself and remained as the sole PI, and she's done splendidly. Oregon Health, Craig Newgard, and Craig partnered with Cynthia Morris, who is a T32 PI. She's a CTSA leader. She is a senior dean for education at OHSU, so she's got impeccable credentials to support the endeavor they were going through. For Pittsburgh, it was Don Yealy and Cliff Calloway, and again, superb clinicians, superb investigators. And then you go down the list. So we had 6, and it worked really well. There is a paper that just was submitted to, I think, Academic Emergency Medicine by Craig Newgard and the entire team, talking about the benefits of the first program. And the program itself achieved far greater rate of changing trainees into K awardees and R awardees than any other NIH program. So it's really wonderful. They're great successes. There are more trailblazers. When we had the second program, we partnered with NIMH and NINR. Again, Vanderbilt, Oregon were in the program. And then we ended up with University of Indiana and Michigan. So Bob Newmar and Jeff Klein. We have the co-PI model. We encouraged everybody to make linkages to their local resources. And we started in the first year of the program to have conference calls, like on a monthly basis. And it was all the PIs, it was the NHLBI persons, and talk, ask questions, bring issues to the group. And that helped solidify the group so that there was a great open communication across sites. Ultimately, the PIs decided to share information on the program, the content, the structure, how to advertise, and they all threw in together for advertising for the program, and they started referring trainees across programs if they felt that they would do better in another program. So, collaboration and teamwork, what made it the whole thing work? Collaboration and teamwork from day one. And move forward to get K and R grants was the only message I gave, and I think that was picked up by the PIs, because in order to get a K, you have to do abstracts and papers and presentations and all that stuff. So counting that stuff doesn't matter. Did you get a K? We had multidisciplinary scholars, we had multidisciplinary PIs. We came together once a year at NIH to have a meeting that lasted for 2 days, bringing together the faculty and the fellows. And faculty were on panels with students that or faculty they didn't know, so that there was no shenanigans. Everybody was on an independent, it was a great group, and it was very strong, and the discussions were amazing. So we had top-notch scholars. Many had MSCI degrees before the program, and we had the annual meeting. And so, first program, 20.6 million. Second program, 10. 72%, actually it's a little bit higher in the paper that was just submitted. It's about 74% of the scholars have obtained a K or R award funding. And then we've really, for the K scholars, each K award is roughly equivalent to $800,000. So for each K, think about the money that's coming into emergency medicine associated with those awards. Salary, protected time, money for research, money for a variety of other activities. So each K is $800,000. So I wanted to summarize with a couple of key points. There are now 3 T32 programs in emergency care research. 2 of the original K-12 programs have now transitioned to T32. Mike Danino at Harvard Beth Israel now has an independent resuscitation program. He is emergency medicine, and for AHA, he's chair of the Resuscitation Council. But that's 3 viable programs led by emergency medicine investigators. And so at this point in time, we have, again, nobody had institutional training programs. Nobody had, when we started, emergency medicine now has a total of 8 institutions that have had these programs and now know how to run T32 programs and how to run institutional training programs. And I think it's boring, but it's a great success because it means you can then replicate this effort in other settings. So my take-home message is we do need more T32 programs. My biggest mantra to trainees is you've got to do the 3rd year of your postdoc, because you'll learn to write grants in that 3rd year, and that's when you get your K. And nobody wants to hear that. Everybody has said no to me for years. But if you look at the people that go through 2 years of training and 3 years of training, the success rate is uncontested. You move with your career if you get a 3rd year on your K. I want everybody to also know that NIH funds a plethora of programs in health services research, decision sciences, bench researches, and epidemiology. You just have to find the programs and see how your interests, your research, how do you fit in, and how do you get into those programs, because they are there. And I finally get to know your CTSA, the Clinical and Translational Science group. They have wonderful opportunities. They generally support a KL2 program, which is for beginning faculty, and takes them through 2 or 3 years of training, which puts you in a great position for getting a K award. So I want you guys to recognize and celebrate the remarkable accomplishments of the program directors, the K-12 program scholars, and they worked together. They had a passion for research. They had a great shared knowledge. They developed collaborative working ties and extended the science. So thank you. The group was wonderful. Wonderful.
Thank you, Dr. Scott. Any questions? So you've gone through 2 iterations of the K-12, and this one just sunsetted.
The 30th of this month.
Yes. How have you seen that the kind of attitudes towards emergency care change over that period of time, realizing that we weren't even in existence when a lot of other programs were getting started?
Right. I think working together with other specialties helps break down the barriers, And so you can have meeting, we had fabulous scientific discussions at our annual meeting where everybody brought their strengths to the table and every discipline brought some different idea, and it became really useful. And I know people poo-poo that, but I have to say it's only, okay, second year in the program, we had a woman in the program at the Penn program who was an MD, PhD. She was an infectious disease person, and so she didn't fit the normal. What emergency medicine? Her area of interest was early recognition of sepsis in babies, like 0 to 3 months, which is a fabulous topic. The kids die, and you know, they do. And early recognition is critical, and to me, who would have thought of that except an ID, MD, PhD? And so she started the work in that domain, and she's done brilliantly. So we've had a couple of those types of individuals join the program, and I think it just makes the case that working together makes much stronger teams and much more balanced teams.
Any other questions?
Time for
Well,
cake and coffee.
exactly. So there's refreshments upstairs in Bayside C. You can ask any question that you've ever wanted to ask an NIH program officer. They're right here who can advise you on the next steps for your career and how to be successful. I know that I owe a large part of my success to Dr. Scott being very stern with me about the expectations. Thank you very much.